Louder than Jen, but let me tell you something. Me. Purpose don't grow in the spotlight, it grows in the shadows. It grows in the place nobody claps for. It's nerd and silent. And what God is doing in you right now can't be broadcast too soon. Or too something that they have to take root before they talk. You want the fruit, but fruit don't grow on exposed roots. If you keep thinking you have to show people your process, you'll still starve your potential before it blossoms. Even blossom. So I'm asking you now, I'm telling you, it's time to open yourself. It's time to shut the noise off. It's time to cancel the comparison, quiet the commentary, and lean into the cocoon season. Yes, that uncomfortable space where nothing looks like what you prayed for. That space where you feel forgotten. That space where people stop calling, opportunities stop coming, and even your own ambition feels like it's gone to sleep. That's not punishment, name, that's preservation. You think you're being overlooked, but you're being hidden. You think you're being delayed, but you're being developed. This stuff you're in is sacred. It's the soil. Don't curse it. Don't rush it. Don't try to escape it. Because this is where you become. Name, you've given so much of your attention to others that you've forgotten how to evolve and voice. You've lost the sound of your own rhythm. And now you're wondering why you feel anxious, why you feel stuck, why you feel like your soul is wearing shoes side to side in the soul. It's because you've been running in lanes that were never built for you. You've been chasing winds that don't belong to your storm. But today I need you to call your spirit back. Call your mind back. Call your focus back. I need you to stop giving people access to your process who were never assigned to your promise. I need you to stop trying to convince people who don't carry your vision to support your mission. They can't see what God whispered in the quiet hours of your midnight prayer. They weren't in the room when you cried on the bathroom floor. They don't know the weight of what you're carrying, and they don't need to. This one is deep. Focus. Focus like your future depends on it, because it does. Focus like healing depends on it, like your peace depends on it. Because distraction is the oldest trick in the book. It doesn't always look like chaos. Sometimes it looks like good opportunities that aren't God opportunities. Sometimes it looks like friends who mean well but move without wisdom. Sometimes it looks like scrolling past the life that seems perfect and certain that can fix brokenness. You have too much oil on your life to be diluted by every opinion. You have too much calling to let your character be compromised. You're not built for crowd chasing, you're built for kingdom impact. And sometimes, that means being silent. That means letting your fruit speak. That means letting your work echo in rooms your mouth never entered. That means saying no to explanations, no to defending your journeys, no to proving your worth. Because here's the truth, when you really start healing, really start growing, really start becoming the loudest thing about you will be your peace, your alignment, your fruit. You won't have to post every milestone. You won't have to announce every step. You won't have to explain your silence. The people who are for you will understand, and the ones who don't, they were never meant to come with you to the next level anyway. So go ahead. Log off for a while. Say no to that event. Let the phone ring. Let them wonder. Let them whisper. Let them assume. You don't owe anyone access to your becoming. You don't owe them a seat in your sacred process. This next version of you is coming from stillness, not striving. Because when you stay silent, you get to hear heaven more clearly. You start to distinguish your voice from their noise. You start to notice what fills you up and what drains you. And you stop apologizing for choosing you. No more shrinking to fit paces that never valued your fullness. No more explaining why you need to rest, why you need to heal, why you need time. If you needed permission to be quiet and grow, here it is. You are allowed. You are allowed to go missing for a season to get your mind right. You are allowed to not answer every text. You are allowed to not be the strong one for everyone else. You are allowed to give yourself the same energy you keep giving away. And listen, doesn't mean you're selfish. This means you're finally stewarding your soul. It means you're recognizing you can't pour from a cracked vessel. You can't lead others into freedom when you're still shackled to their opinions. You can't birth purpose in a room full of noise. Some deliveries require a closed door. So be still. Be hidden. Be intentional. God is doing more in your silence than you ever could in your striving. What you build in secret will sustain you in public. What you master in private will bless you in places you haven't even discussed. Silence is not the absence of movement, it's the presence of meaning. It is the most misunderstood part of the process. The world has taught you to equate quiet with failure, to measure success by visibility, to treat noise as relevance. But heaven doesn't operate on hashtags. God doesn't rush relationships. This culture so moves fast. So when the silence starts to settle in your life no longer echoes with applause, that doesn't mean you've missed it. It means you're in the middle of something sacred. There is something powerful that happens when everything gets quiet. The kind of quiet that used to make you anxious, the kind that makes you feel forgotten. That silence is where clarity comes to visit. That silence is where you start to hear the voice you buried under expectations, intent, and performance. That silence is where God finally gets a word in, because He's been trying to talk, but the volume of your surroundings has been drowning him, and the more distracted you are, the harder it is to discern what's Him and what's just your fear wearing makeup. You've been in rooms full of people and still felt unseen. You shared your vision with the wrong voices, and now your confidence is bleeding. Because not everyone knows how to hold your becoming. Not everyone has the spiritual hands to carry the weight of your transformation. So the silence comes not to punish, but to protect, to create distance between you and the distractions, between you and the doubt, between in the counterfeit comfort of performance-based value. In the silence you learn who you are without the applause, without the titles, without the affirmation, without the story you keep rehearsing to you enough. In the silence, dark trips you bear not to shame you, but to remind you that you were enough before the world told what you had to be. That your calling isn't built on noise. It's built on knowing. And knowing doesn't always come with clarity. It often starts with chaos. The kind of chaos that makes you question why everything went quiet all of a sudden. Why the door closed. Why the connection dried up. Why the opportunity disappeared. But what if that silence is strategic? What if that closed door was the thing that ever happened to your purpose? Because silence can do what noise never could. It reveals the real from the illusion. It teaches you that just because it looks good doesn't mean it's God. That just because it feels familiar doesn't mean it's faithful. Silence doesn't lie. It doesn't flatter you. It doesn't sugarcoat. It holds up a mirror and asks you if you like what you see when nobody else is watching. That's the hard part, isn't it? Facing yourself. Sitting with the version of you you've been running from. The broken you, the tired you, the insecure and so uncertain, overworked, underloved, underestimated you. But that's where real growth begins, when you stop editing your truth and start embracing your healing. When you stop showing up to be seen and start showing up to be changed. See, name you can't heal in the spotlight what you haven't acknowledged in the shadows. You can't expect transformation if you're still pretending. And you can't move forward if you're imagining an image. The silence is God's invitation to come clean. Not just to Him, but to yourself. To finally get honest about what's not working. About what you're pretending to enjoy. About what's draining you, but you're too afraid to walk away from because it looks good on paper. Silence is where God rewrites the scripts you didn't even know you were reading from. The lies you believed about what it means to be worthy. The generational patterns you were taught to normalize. The hustle you adopted as identity. He begins to undo the noise layer by layer until you can finally hear again. Until until you start recognizing the sound of your own voice under all that pressure. Until your soul exhales for the first time in years. And when you get to that place, that deep down place where silence becomes dance sanctuary, you stop fearing solitude. You stop running from stillness. You start craving it. Because you've learned that not everyone who claps is cheering. That not every open door is divine. That sometimes the best thing God ever gave you was the gift of being hidden. Being hidden is hard when your ego wants to be validated, when your wounds want to be seen, when your trauma wants to prove that it was worth something. But the truth is you are worth the wait. And some things take time to be prepared properly. Some wines don't taste right unless they have been aged. Some anointings don't carry weight unless they've been pried in private. And versions of you can only emerge after everything else gets quiet. That's why silence matters name. Because it's not a pause in your progress, it's a part of your power. It's where your strength is reborn. It's where your discernment sharpens. It's where your vision gets cleaned. When everything else goes silent, you finally stop seeking the world's opinion and start seeking God's direction. You start choosing alignment over attention. You stop asking, do they see me? And start asking God, where you need me to be? So don't despise the quiet. Don't fill it with noise just to feel less alone. Don't rush to be heard just because your ego is hungry. Sit with it, stay there. Let it stretch you. Let it teach you. Let it chew. Let it strip away everything that wasn't built to last. Let it expose the habits, the patterns, the people that can't walk with you into what's next. Because the silence is not your enemy, it's your awakening. Let me know if you'd like the next keynote expanded as well, or if you want this one continued even further. Absolutely. Here is the 1,000-word expansion of key keynote. 2. Focus is a form of self-respect, written in the same style as before, modern, introspective, powerful, and without any heading or final closing sentence. There comes a point when you get tired of bleeding for everyone else's healing. When you realize that showing up for people who wouldn't cross the street for you is not loyalty, it's self-neglect, dropped in false humility. And it's not that you're bitter, it's not that you don't love them, it's just that you're learning something now, something holy. You're learning that focus is a form of self-respect. That honoring your assignment means you might have to disappoint a few people who were never assigned to it in the first place. You've been so caught up in fixing, pouring, supporting, and surviving that you forgot to check in with the most important relationship you'll ever have, the one with yourself. And now you're trying to figure out why you're always tired, always irritated, always one more request away from faith and tapping. It's because your boundaries have been blurry. You've been available in ways that have cost you your voice, your sleep, your sanity. And the truth is, you're not tired because you're doing too much. You're tired because you've been doing too much of the wrong thing for too many of the wrong people at the wrong time. But now your soul is calling you back, calling you inward, calling you to prioritize what you've been pushing aside. Because your calling isn't just about what you do for others, it's about how you care for yourself while you're doing it. You can't be effective purpose while you're emotionally bankrupt. You can't elevate if your peace is always the price. God didn't call you to suffer just to be seen as strong. He called you to be whole. He called you to be wise. He called you to walk in clarity, and clarity only comes when you focus. Focus isn't about hustle, it's about alignment. It's about saying yes for what's sacred and no to what's draining. It's about recognizing that just because you're capable doesn't mean you're called. That just because it's good doesn't mean it's God. That just because it helps them doesn't mean it's healthy for you. Focus means checking your spirit before your schedule. It means asking, is this in agreement with where I'm headed? Instead of, will they be mad if I don't show up? Some people are addicted to your distraction. They thrive when you're off course because as long as you're fixing their mess, you're not facing your own. As long as you're managing their chaos, you're not cultivating your purpose. But the moment you choose to focus, The moment you start protecting your time, your space, your energy, they'll call it selfish. They'll say you've changed. And you know what? You have. You have. You've evolved. You've woken up. You've stopped performing to be loved and started loving yourself without performance. Focus is radical. It's rebellious. It's you saying, I will no longer abandon myself to make someone else feel comfortable. It's you reclaiming your narrative, your breath, your joy. It's you choosing me over helping when helping is keeping you hostage. It's the courage to disappoint others so you don't keep disappointing yourself. And maybe, just maybe, you're realizing that part of your exhaustion came from pretending to be okay with things that were slowly killing your spirit. That pretending not to notice the disrespect, the imbalance, the emotional weight you were carrying for people who weren't even carrying their own. You were being strong, yes, but were you being wise? There's nothing noble about self-sacrifice when it's rooted in fear. Fear of being left. Fear of not being needed. Fear of what they'll say if I draw the line. But that fear is a liar. And every time you betray your boundaries to keep someone around, you're teaching your soul that their comfort matters more than your calling. But you've been called to more. And you can't carry what's next if you're carrying what's no longer yours to hold. Focus means making peace with the fact that everyone won't understand yourself, that some people benefited from your scattered energy, that some relationships were built on you being broken. But when you start healing, when you start focusing, when you self-filter, aligning, you shift the entire atmosphere. And people who only knew you as available might not recognize the version of us now aware. Awareness changes everything. It wakes you up to the truth that you are not obligated to shrink in order to belong. That you don't have to lose sleep to keep the peace. That you don't have to abandon your assignment to maintain a connection. When you focus, you start moving differently. You start choosing rest over rush, stillness over striving, intention over obligation, and that kind of clarity can't coexist with chaos. You weren't made to live reactive. You were made to live rooted, and roots don't grow in constant movement. They grow in stillness, in attention, in care. So the more you focus on your soil, your mental health, your emotional health, self-spiritual alignment, the more fruit you'll see in your life. Not forced fruit. Not fruit you have to perform to keep, but real, sustainable, undeniable fruit that flows from being grounded. It's not always glamorous. Focus sometimes means turning down invitations, missing out on what looks fun but isn't aligned. Saying no when your old self would have said yes to keep the peace, It's not about isolation, it's about intention. About choosing yourself without guilt. About becoming unavailable to what drains you and completely open to what grows you. There is nothing wrong with you for wanting to preserve your energy, for needing more space, for pulling back from what no longer fits the future God is preparing for you. That's not distance, that's discernment. That's you learning the difference between what feeds your ego and what feeds your purpose. Because naming your future requires focus, and focus requires release. Release of distractions. Release of people-pleasing. Release of false obligations. You cannot elevate with hands full of what God asked you to put down. You cannot become while constantly explaining you're becoming. Let it go. Let them go. Let what they think go. Your freedom is not up for debate. You've spent enough years giving away your focus to fear, the pressure to other people's narrative. Now, it's time to give your focus to you, to your peace, to your purpose, to the parts of you that are still healing, still growing, still becoming. And when you give yourself that gift, that holy permission to choose you, the world may not clap, but heaven will take notice. Let me know if you'd like to expand Keynote 3 next. Of course, here's the 1,000-word expansion of Keynote No. 3. Stop seeking validation from others in the same emotionally rich, soul-stirring style without any headings or final closing statement. Just like you asked at some point, you're going to have to choose between being understood and being obedient. Because obedience will often take you down a path where the people you thought would clap the loudest go silent. Where the ones you assumed would cover you suddenly start questioning your every move. And if you're still living for their applause, their confirmation, their agreement, you will end up forfeiting your own voice just to keep theirs loud. There is something dangerous about needing to be validated by people who have no vision for your calling. It will have you shrinking your soul to fit into their comfort. It will have you questioning instructions you know came from heaven just because they don't make sense to someone who never prayed over your promise. You were never meant to live in bondage to opinions. You were meant to live in alignment with purpose. And purpose doesn't always come with a consensus. You keep asking for a sign, for a confirmation, for a yes from someone who was never given the blueprint for your breakthrough. And while you're waiting for them to get on board, you're just starving. Your destiny is delayed. Because instead of running with the word God gave you, you're sitting in rooms trying to explain your obedience to people who've never carried what you're carrying. And let's just be honest, some of the people you're seeking validation for are only comfortable with you as long as you stall. As long as you stay accessible. As long as you don't challenge the box they place you in. They liked you when you were insecure because it made them feel big. They liked you when you doubted yourself because it made them feel needed. But now that you're rising, now that you're waking up to your own voice, now that you're starting to believe in what God whispered to you, they're uncomfortable. And instead of celebrating your growth, they question your intentions. But hear me, Nate. Just because they're loud doesn't mean they're right. There are levels to this, and not everyone has the capacity to climb where you're going. Some people can only handle the version of you that stays questioning, doubting, checking in before every move. But the version of you that's bold, the version of you that's healed, the version that doesn't need permission to go up fully, that version will require you to let go of needing to be liked. Because you can't lead while being led by the need to be understood. That need will trap you. It will silence you. It will rob you of your power. The truth is, validation feels good until it becomes a cage. You start dressing for them, posting for them, moving for them, building for them. And before you know it, you've constructed a life that looks good from the outside but leaves you empty on the outside. You weren't created to live that way. You weren't created to spend your life proving your worth to people who can't even see themselves clearly. If they can't validate their own identity, why do you think they have the language to affirm yours? If they're still trapped in cycles, fear, jealousy, or journey, or insecurity, what makes you think they'll recognize your freedom and applaud it? They can't. And that's not your fault. It's your wake-up call. You've got to stop giving people backstage access to your healing when all they want is a front row seat to your performance. You've got to stop inviting people into your sacred space who treat you boring like entertainment. This is not for likes. This is not for applause. This is not for clout. And your becoming requires solitude sometimes. It requires you to walk even when no one's watching, to build even when no one's cheering, to keep going even when it looks like nothing is happening. You're going to have to get comfortable with being misunderstood. You're going to have to make peace with silence. Because silence is an absence, it's alignment. And if your spirit is loud with God's voice, you won't need the noise of others to keep you moving. That's the place you're headed, to a place where your confidence is rooted in your connection to Him, not in the confirmation of them. It's not that their voices don't matter, it's that they don't matter more than your own. And you've spent enough time silencing yourself to keep the peace. Enough time dumbing down your dreams so they wouldn't feel threatened. Enough time waiting on validation that was never coming. Now is the season to validate yourself, to affirm yourself, to stand flat-footed in what God told you and not look to the left or the right to see who approves. You don't need their approval when you've got God's assignment. You don't need their understanding when you've been given divine clarity. You don't need their agreement when heaven has already said yes. You've been trying to convince people who don't even believe in themselves to believe in you, and it's not working because it was never supposed to. There's a reason your vision looks crazy to them. It wasn't revealed to them. There's a reason your steps don't make sense. It's because they weren't ordered for them. And you will exhaust yourself trying to get them to see what only your spirit has been shown. That exhaustion is your confirmation. That frustration is your red flag. You don't need more people. You need more presence, more truth, more trust in the voice that keeps whispering, you were made for more. So go ahead. Make the move. Say the yes. Walk the path, even if it means walking alone. Even if they talk. Even if they laugh. Even if they distance themselves. Because you don't need the whole crowd when you've got conviction. You don't need their nod of approval when you've got a divine download. Let your results speak. Let your consistency speak. Let your freedom speak. Let your peace speak. Because the ones who are sent to walk with you won't need convincing. They'll recognize the oil on your life by the way you trade, not by the way you explain it. And here's the truth, name. The more you validate yourself, the less you'll need others to do it. The more you affirm what God has already said, the more you'll stop waiting on people who weren't even in the room when he said it. And that's the shift. That's the transformation. When you stop asking, currently at tables God never called you to, and start building your own with joy, with courage, with confidence. Let me know when you're ready for the next keynote. I'm here to continue this with you. Absolutely. Here's the 1,000-word expansion of keynote. For silence is not emptiness, that's establishment. Continuing in the Sarha inspired with emotionally rich. Soul deep and without a heading or final closing sentence. There's a silence that settles over your life, not because you've been forsaken, but because something sacred is being established in you. It's not the kind of silence that leaves you lost, it's the kind that roots you. A time that doesn't scream to be noticed but stands tall in its stillness. It's the kind that shifts the need to prove, perform, or explain. It's a holy kind of silence, the kind that doesn't come to punish you but to plant. You thought silence meant you were being overlooked, forgotten, pushed to the side while others thought the moment. You thought silence meant you were losing time, that you were running out of chances. You looked around and wondered why the doors weren't opening, why one wasn't being called, why your prayers were met with quiet. But the silence wasn't rejection, it was strategy. It was heaven's way of saying, sit down and let me build this right. Because what's coming through you can't be rushed. What God is birthing in you doesn't come through shortcuts. You don't need noise to validate what's being grown in private. And even if no one sees it yet, even if no one claps, even if the world is silent, you are still becoming. You are still rising. You are still being established and are deeper than applause can reach. The silence is where God lays the foundation. It's where he clears the clutter and makes space for the new. It's where he separates your identity from your image. It's where he removes the mask you wore to survive and reveals the face you forgot was even yours. You can't build identity on noise. Noise is fleeting. Noise can turn on you, noise can deceive. But silence is honest, silence is surgical, silence gets down to the marrow. It asks questions that noise would rather avoid. It challenges every lie you were told about who you are and who you'll never be. And in that space where you have no performance, no audience, no filter, God starts reconstructing everything. Not for the crowd, but for the calling. That's why the silence hurts so bad, not because you're being punished, but because he's touching things you buried. He's going back to wounds you learned to decorate. He's digging into insecurities you've hidden behind accomplishments. He's pulling out the pride you used to protect your pain. The silence feels like exposure, but it's really excavation. It's God saying, I can't let this next version of you be built on brokenness. He's not withholding from you, he's working on you. And the kind of work he's doing can't be rushed into a moment. It needs a season. A still one. A silent one. And if you're honest, the self is also where you start seeing who really heard you before the noise. Who really knew your heart when your hands weren't producing anything. Who stayed when you weren't a resource, weren't a network, weren't a platform. The silence reveals the leeches and the lifers. It shows you who loved you for you, and who loved the version of you they could use. And it's a painful blessing. Because sometimes you need to be stripped of the crowd to recognize the ones sent by covenant. But more than anything, the silence is where you learn to trust God without updates, to believe without the benefit of being seen. It's where your faith is refined and your voice is rebuilt. It's where you find out if you really believe what you've been posting about. Because faith that needs constant feedback is just performance in disguise. But the kind of faith that can grow in the dark, that can stand when there's no applause, that can worship in the waiting, that's the kind of fact that there's an anointing that only comes from silence, a depth, a discernment, a power that doesn't need to prove itself. It doesn't shout. It doesn't seek attention. It walks into a room and shifts the atmosphere just by being. And you don't get that in noise, you get that in the hidden place. In the quiet, yes, when nobody else understands. That's where the oil is cultivated. Not on stages, not in life. In silence. And you want to know what's wild. The things will teach you how to listen again. How to hear your own voice beneath the echoes of expectation. How to recognize God's whisper of your own worry. You've been moving so fast, doing so much, saying yes to everything and everyone, and now finally He's slowed everything down. And it's uncomfortable. You don't know how to sit still. You don't know how to rest without guilt. You don't know how to be without performing. But this silence is your invitation to break that cycle. Because you are more than your productivity, more than your performance, more than what you create or fix or carry. And the silence, as brutal as it feels, is telling you the truth you forgot you are enough. Without the noise, without the crowd, without the constant doing, you are still enough. You are still chosen. You are still called. So yes, it's quiet. Yes, it's lonely sometimes. But heaven is still speaking. Destiny is still forming. And you are not being left, you are being laid down like a foundation. And soon what's been hidden will rise. What's been built in silence will echo louder than any performance. Not because you forced it, but because you endured the quiet long enough to be established for real. Let me know if you'd like to combine all expanded keynotes into one complete document or compete with anything else. Absolutely. Here's the 1,000-word expansion of keynotes. No. 5. Growth happens in isolation, written in the same powerful, spirit-led style without headings or closing lines, just pure flow, deeply rooted in that raw, authentic voice. You don't grow in the spotlight, you grow in the shadows. You don't evolve when everybody's watching. You grow when nobody sees you wrestling. Nobody sees the nights you cry out to God, asking Him to strip you of everything that's not like Him. Nobody sees the hours you spend confronting the patterns that kept you bound. Nobody sees the internal battles, the conversations you have with yourself, the tensions you fight that never make it to your testimony. Growth happens in isolation, not in public applause. You want to be whole, but wholeness comes with separation. Not because you're better than anyone else, but because coming demands you leave behind the familiar. The truth is, you can't heal in the same environment that broke you. You can't grow while still surrounded by what numbs your potential. Some of the separation you're experiencing right now is not rejection, it's realignment. It's heaven creating a gap between where you've been and where you're called to go. And it hurts. It hurts when the phone stops ringing, when the texts slow down, when the invitations dry up. You start wondering what you did wrong, You start looking for something to fix in yourself just to get the connection back. But what if it's not punishment? What if it's permission? Permission to bloom without an audience. Permission to sit with your truth. Permission to finally be alone long enough to hear yourself think, feel grief, forgive, release. There are levels to this thing. And sometimes growth requires you to go underground. You're the seed. And seeds don't sprout on stages. They sprout beneath the soil, buried in the dark, alone. But something miraculous happens there. Roots start to stretch, foundations start to take form. And while everyone else thinks nothing is happening, heaven knows you're becoming unshakable. You're learning how to love yourself without needing a mirror held up by others. You're discovering how to encourage yourself when nobody else knows what you're going through. You're finding joy in your own company, not because you hate people, but because you finally realize that peace is too expensive to be giving it away for free. You're learning the difference between being alone and being lonely. Lonely is its connection. And right now, God has disconnected you from the noise so you can reconnect to your name. In isolation, you begin to unlearn. You begin to pull out the lies they told you, that you weren't enough, that you were too much, that you had to prove yourself to be valuable. You start questioning every identity that was built on pain. And it's scary, because you don't always recognize yourself without the trauma. But you stay in the stillness, you stay in the discomfort, because you know that what's coming out of this cocoon is bringing out the pain it takes to grow into it. You're not missing out. You're being set apart. And there's a difference. Set apart doesn't mean you're isolated forever. It means you're incubated. It means your destiny is under divine protection. It means your voice is thereby sharpened. Your discernment is being refined. Your character is being rebuilt. Because when you do come out, when God releases you from the pain place, you won't come out broken. You'll come out branded. You'll carry something real. Not trendy, not temporary, but timeless, tested, proven. Don't rush this season. Don't rush to be seen when God's still healing the parts of you that bleed when touched. Because if you present yourself too soon, they won't get the healed version, they'll get the hurting version, destined and vicious. And the last thing this world needs is another platform built on pain. Let the healing be complete. Let the restoration go deep. Let the pruning do its full work. Isolation also shows you who's really with you. When you're no longer giving, performing, pleasing, who checks in not because they need you, but because they love you, you begin to see clearer. Not with your eyes, but with your spirit. That clarity is protection. That clarity is proof that the people who are meant to walk with you in your next will not be intimidated by your silence. They will not question your worth because you're not on display. They will sit with you in the soil. They will pray over your process. They will protect your becoming. And when you find those people, hold them close. But even if nobody stays, even if everybody walks away, even if the circle shrinks down to you and God, that's still enough. That's still holy. Because there's no safer place to grow than in the hands of the one who created you. He knows what you're carrying. He knows what's left ahead. And he knows that without isolation, you would have kept performing. You would have kept pretending. You would have kept hiding behind busy schedules and hollow friendships. But now you're facing it. You're healing. You're growing. And you're doing it without the noise. Growth isn't always loud. Sometimes it looks like rest. Sometimes it looks like boundaries. Sometimes it looks like saying no without explaining. Sometimes it looks like walking away without guilt. Sometimes it looks like choosing peace over popularity, and that kind of growth is sacred. It doesn't need a post. It doesn't need a platform. It just needs your full surrender. So when it feels like nobody sees you, when it feels like you're being forgotten, when it feels like everyone else is moving on and you're stuck in the background, remember this: you are not being delayed. You are being developed. And development in the kingdom often looks like isolation in the natural. But don't despise it. Don't fear it. Embrace it. Because on the other side of this silence is the light of thee. On the other side of this breaking is the birthing of a new version of you, one that doesn't need to be loud to be powerful. One that doesn't need to be followed to be chosen. One that knows her worth in the dark just as much as she shines in the light. If you'd like, I can combine all 5 keynote expansions into one full document in the same tone. Just let me know. Of course, here is the 1,000-word expansion of Keynote No. 6. Everything doesn't deserve a reaction. In the same deep, emotional, and so and so flowing continuously without headings or a closing sentence. Just as you asked. There comes a time in your journey when you realize that not every battle is yours to fight, and not every comment deserves your energy. The version of you that used to clap back, that used to match energy, that used to chase closure or explanations, that version had to fight. Because she didn't know her value yet. She thought her silence was weakness. She thought if she didn't speak up every time, she was being walked over. She confused peace with passivity, but now you're learning that real power is quiet. Real power doesn't chase noise. Real power is still, confident, rooted. Everything doesn't deserve a reaction. Every opinion doesn't need a rebuttal. Every rumor doesn't require a response. Because the moment you respond to something beneath your calling, you shrink your center selfness at its level. And you've come too far. Cried too many tears, broken too many generational cycles to keep giving discounts on your dignity. The enemy would love nothing more than to drag you back into distractions dressed up as drama. But your growth has taught you how to pause before you engage. It's taught you how to preserve your peace before you proceed both fight. You've learned that just because something was said doesn't mean it was said. Some words come to poke. Some looks come to provoke. Some actions are assignments to pull you out of character. But when you know who you are, when you know what you carry, you stop. Of every argument you're invited to it. You stop defending yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. You stop entertaining anything that costs you more than it pays in purpose. You learn how to be quiet, not because your infectious voice is too expensive, waste on small matters. And let's be honest, the version of you that used to react quickly was exhausted. She lived in survival mode. She didn't know how to let things go. She felt she had to fight for her worth, argue her name, prove her truth. But now you're healing. And healing makes you soft in a different way. It doesn't make you weak. It makes you wise. It teaches you to ask, is this worth my peace? Is this worth the delay it might bring in my spirit? Is this worth stepping down from the place I fought to reach? There's a reason silence is powerful. It's not the absence of thought, it's the presence of discipline. It's the wisdom to understand that some things fix themselves when you stay still. Some things lose their power the moment you stop feeding them. Your reaction is their reward. Your energy is their goal. But when you stop showing up to the chaos, it dies on its own. Let them talk. Let them assume. Let them wonder. You're not here to be understood by everybody. You're here to be obedient to the whisper that called you out of the pit and into the promise. You don't have time to clap back when your hands are full of purpose. You don't have time to defend yourself when your destiny is already speaking louder than their accusations. What's understood by heaven doesn't have to be explained on earth. And even if they never say sorry, even if they never live the life, even if they never change their narrative, you don't need their closure when they've given you clarity. Sometimes the silence is your answer. Sometimes your lack of reaction is the loudest statement you'll ever make. It says, I've outgrown the need to be right in places that can't even handle truth. It says, I love myself too much to bleed in public over people who aren't even worth the wound. It says, you can keep the drama, I'm keeping my destiny. That kind of maturity, it's earned. It's built in the trenches. It's built after being misunderstood so many times that you no longer need to be seen to know you're secure. You're not who you used to be. You don't need to yell anymore to feel heard. You don't need to react just to feel powerful. Your restraint is your revelation. You've got peace now, and peace don't play. Peace protects. Peace prioritizes. Peace passes understanding and also passes by nonsense without stopping to explain itself. And yes, it's tempting. It's tempting to respond, to defend your name, to call them out, to put them in their place. But there's something more important than proving your point, preserving your power. You're not for everybody, and that's okay. Everybody won't get your healing. Everybody won't understand your elevation. Everybody won't applaud your boundaries, but just because they don't clap doesn't mean you're not dancing in purpose. This is a new era for you. An era where your peace is non-negotiable. Where your joy isn't up for discussion. Where your response isn't reactive, it's strategic. And the strategy now is silence. Not because you're scared, but because you're sacred, you're consecrated, you've been set apart. And you can't keep on things that drain you and expect to remain full. This doesn't mean you're passive. It means you're precise. It means you know when to speak and when to stand still. It means you understand that power isn't in being loud, it's in being led. You're not ignoring disrespect, you're just choosing not to stoop. You're not avoiding confrontation. You're just not chasing it anymore. You're not being fake. You're just being focused. Because focused people don't flinch at foolishness. You pray too hard to go back to the petty. You fasted too long to be feeding flesh. You've grown too much to give into gossip. Let them wonder why you're quiet. Let them create stories. Let them assume. Because with how they're talking, you're building. While they're gossiping, you're growing. While they're distracted, you're determined. And soon enough, your silence will make the loudest statements devolve fruit. Real fruit. Peace that can't be fake. Joy that doesn't depend on people. Confidence that doesn't come from compliments. Love that doesn't need validations. Legacy that can't be erased by life. That's what comes when you stop reacting and start rising. You trade petty for purpose. You trade noise for knowing. You trade needing to be heard for learning how to listen to your spirit, to your boundaries, to your God. And every time you choose silence over shade, grace over gossip, presence over performance, you are declaring to the heavens and to hell, I'm not who I used to be. I'm healed. I'm whole and walking in wisdom. And wisdom will always take you further than wherever could. Don't be discouraged by the silence. Don't mistake solitude for punishment. This is sacred ground name, and only those who can handle quiet can handle elation.